Underworld, Evolution, released in 2006, brought together a cast that not only elevated the franchise, but also helped define a particular era of genre filmmaking. At its core, the film was carried by the formidable presence of Kate Beckinsale, whose performance as Selene was central to both the narrative and the visual identity of the Underworld series. Beckinsale's embodiment of the vampire death dealer was not just about physical prowess or action choreography. It was an emotionally nuanced performance that gave weight to the film's darker, mythological elements. Before Underworld, Beckinsale was largely known for her work in period dramas and romantic films such as Much Ado About Nothing and Pearl Harbor. Her transition to action heroine in the first Underworld film in 2003 was a significant pivot in her career and solidified her place in Hollywood as a versatile leading lady. With Evolution, Beckinsale further cemented her status, showing that her role was not a one-time surprise but a definitive shift in her acting portfolio. Her performance in Evolution allowed her to refine her portrayal, adding layers of vulnerability and resolve, particularly as Selene grapples with her expanding powers and new revelations about her past. Opposite Beckinsale, Scott Speedman reprised his role as Michael Corvin, the human-turned hybrid whose character arc drives much of the series' ongoing mythology. Prior to his involvement in the Underworld series, Speedman was best known for his work on the television drama Felicity, where he portrayed Ben Covington. While that show allowed him to showcase his talents in more grounded, emotional narratives, Underworld offered him the opportunity to engage with a physically demanding role that also required emotional depth. As Michael, Speedman had to strike a balance between human vulnerability and supernatural strength, a task that became more complex in Evolution as his character continued his transformation. His chemistry with Beckinsale was essential, offering a romantic subplot that never overwhelmed the main story, but added necessary emotional stakes. Although Speedman didn't continue with the franchise after this installment, his role in the first two films remains integral to the series' foundation and helped him break into the world of action and fantasy films, expanding his range and visibility in international markets. Another standout performer in Underworld, Evolution, was Tony Curran, who played the ancient vampire Markus Corvinus. Curran brought a menacing yet tragic intensity to the role, making Markus one of the more compelling antagonists in the series. Curran, a Scottish actor with a strong background in theater and character-driven roles, had previously appeared in films like The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and Gladiator in supporting roles. His portrayal of Markus showcased his ability to bring gravitas and menace to a character that might have otherwise slipped into cliché. He infused Markus with a sense of wounded pride and desperation, characteristics that made him both dangerous and somewhat sympathetic. His commanding physicality and haunting delivery contributed significantly to the film's darker tone. Curran's performance in Evolution introduced him to a broader audience, particularly in the fantasy and science fiction fan communities, and led to future roles in genre projects including television appearances in Doctor Who and Defiance. Derek Jacobi, a titan of stage and screen, took on the role of Alexander Corvinus, the immortal progenitor of both the vampire and Lycan bloodlines. Jacobi's inclusion in the cast lent the film an air of classical gravitas. Known for his distinguished career in theater, especially with the Royal Shakespeare Company and film roles in titles such as Gladiator and I, Claudius, Jacobi brought a regal authority and emotional complexity to the role of Alexander. His presence provided a bridge between the high fantasy elements of the lore and the modern, action-driven aesthetic of the film. Jacobi's performance grounded the more mythological components of the story, delivering exposition with a sense of earnest wisdom that few other actors could manage without tipping into melodrama. His involvement also signaled the filmmaker's intent to raise the artistic credibility of the film by casting an actor of such reputation and skill. Stephen Mackintosh, who played Andreas Tanis, the exiled vampire historian, added yet another layer of intrigue to the film. Mackintosh, a British actor known for his roles in films like Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and the BBC adaptation of The Buddha of Suburbia, brought sly intelligence and unpredictability to his character. His portrayal of Tanis was key in expanding the lore of the Underworld universe. Tanis acted as a kind of unreliable narrator, revealing long-buried secrets and reshaping what the audience and characters thought they knew. Macintosh's ability to project both cunning and cowardice in equal measure made Tanis an interesting foil, enriching the film's narrative complexity. Though not a household name at the time, Macintosh's performance was memorable enough to leave a lasting impression on audiences and critics who appreciated the depth he brought to a supporting role. Another notable cast member was Brian Steele, who took on the physically demanding role of William Corvinus, the first and most powerful werewolf. Though the character of William had limited dialogue and was primarily conveyed through physical performance and prosthetics, Steele's portrayal was essential to making the creature both terrifying and believable. As a veteran of creature performances, Steele had already been part of films like Hellboy and Blade Trinity, and his experience in costume and makeup-heavy roles made him an ideal choice for William. His understanding of movement, body language, and how to express rage and pain through physicality alone was critical to creating a monster that was more than just a CGI creation. It was a living, breathing threat. While Steele's name may not be widely known, his contributions to genre filmmaking are significant, and Underworld, Evolution is a clear example of how such performances elevate the visual and emotional impact of a fantasy action narrative. Rounding out the cast were several supporting players who each made valuable contributions. Zita Garag reprised her role as Amelia in a brief but pivotal appearance. Her elegance and ethereal presence added a sense of mystique to the vampire coven's hierarchy. Likewise, actors like John Mann and Razak Adoti added texture to the world of Underworld, Evolution through their performances as military enforcers and loyalists, helping to flesh out the world beyond the core group of characters. Underworld, Evolution, released in 2006, arrived during a period of shifting tastes in cinematic culture. The early 2000s were marked by a growing fascination with dark fantasy, gothic aesthetics, and morally ambiguous characters. These years saw a resurgence of interest in vampire and werewolf lore, not only in film but across literature, television, and gaming. The Underworld franchise, and Evolution in particular, capitalized on this cultural moment by offering a world that was both stylishly dark and richly mythological. The film did not exist in a vacuum. It was part of a broader cultural conversation about duality, identity, and rebellion against rigid hierarchies, themes that resonated deeply with millennial audiences and younger Gen Zers alike. One of the most significant aspects of the film's cultural impact was its role in solidifying the vampire-werewolf genre hybrid in mainstream cinema. While vampires and werewolves had long existed in separate narrative spaces, Underworld, Evolution helped blend these two mythologies into a cohesive universe that treated both with equal narrative importance. This integration inspired later media projects to explore similar cross-species dynamics, from television series like The Vampire Diaries and Teen Wolf to video games that adopted hybrid monster lore as a central gameplay mechanic. The film's success also signaled that audiences were hungry for dense lore and complex backstories, paving the way for later film franchises to dive deeper into world-building without losing commercial appeal. Underworld, Evolution was also notable for its aesthetic contribution to pop culture. Its highly stylized visual language, characterized by blue-gray color grading, leather-clad characters, and industrial Gothic set designs, became instantly recognizable and widely imitated. Fashion subcultures such as goth, cyberpunk, and industrial saw echoes of their own aesthetics represented on screen, lending the film an air of authenticity and helping it gain cult status within those communities. Cosplayers, fan artists, and designers took direct inspiration from the film's visual choices, making Selene's sleek black outfit and twin pistols iconic symbols of empowered femininity within the realm of speculative fiction. This representation of a female lead who is neither a damsel nor simply a sidekick had a deep cultural effect, particularly among female fans who rarely saw such roles carried with conviction and depth. In broader societal terms, the film also reflected the early 2000s cultural anxiety around genetic manipulation, secret history, and power hidden behind institutions. The idea that ancient forces controlled the present from behind closed doors paralleled rising public interest in conspiracy theories, hidden societies, and repressed knowledge. This aligned with 9/11 global sentiments where distrust in established systems, government transparency, and unseen manipulation became widespread concerns. Underworld, Evolution, with its clandestine vampire covens and secret histories spanning millennia, tapped into these fears in a fantastical but symbolically potent way. It dramatized questions of legacy, inherited guilt, and the danger of unchecked power, offering a metaphorical lens through which audiences could explore their real-world uncertainties. The movie also made a subtle but meaningful cultural statement through its treatment of history and mythology. Rather than leaning on classical European aristocratic vampire tropes alone, it built an original mythology that spanned continents and centuries. This move toward creating new legends rather than recycling existing folklore resonated with audiences growing weary of formulaic horror. The film created its own ecosystem of gods, monsters, and fallen heroes, which encouraged deeper fan engagement and inspired expanded universe materials like comics, novels, and online lore databases. This participatory aspect helped build an active fandom that shared theories, created fan fiction, and debated character motivations, enhancing the film's long-term cultural relevance. Underworld, Evolution also contributed to the broader trend of cinematic anti-heroes. Selene, though righteous in her motives, is far from a conventional hero. She kills with precision, operates in secrecy, and shows no allegiance to traditional notions of morality. This mirrored a growing interest in protagonists who operated outside of the law and societal norms. At the time, audiences were increasingly drawn to characters who rebelled against institutions, challenged tradition, and made morally complicated choices. The popularity of Selene can be compared to contemporaries like Jason Bourne, Riddick, or even the rising appeal of characters like Dexter Morgan on television. These figures embodied a shift away from clean-cut heroism toward more complex, internalized struggles, a change that would influence storytelling across media for years to come. From a cultural impact standpoint, the film's portrayal of hybrid identity, particularly through Michael Corvin, spoke to a generation exploring questions of belonging, ancestry, and the merging of conflicting internal forces. Michael struggled to reconcile his dual nature as both vampire and werewolf could be read as an allegory for cultural hybridity, mixed heritage, or even internal psychological conflict. For viewers navigating personal, racial, or ideological dualities, his character offered a symbolic mirror. This idea of transformation as both painful and empowering was especially resonant in an age when identity politics, globalization, and self-definition were becoming increasingly central topics of public discourse. The legacy of Underworld, Evolution in internet culture is also notable. As online forums and fan sites became more prevalent in the mid-2000s, the film gained new life through memes, fan edits, and animated GIFs. Selene's icy stare, dramatic slow-motion action scenes, and stylized gun battles became visual shorthand for cool in countless online spaces. YouTube fan tributes using clips from the film set to rock or electronic music were common, and discussions about vampire lore and fan theories flourished on early platforms like LiveJournal and DeviantArt. The film's visual palette and tone contributed to its mimetic appeal. It wasn't just watched, it was quoted, clipped, and remixed by fans who engaged with its imagery on a daily basis. Even years later, screenshots and references continue to circulate in online fandoms, showcasing its lasting presence in digital spaces. Politically, while the film did not make overt statements, its underlying themes about authoritarian control, secret histories, and bloodlines as sources of power offered quiet critiques of class, legacy, and institutional dominance. The vampire elders functioned as a metaphor for old power structures that resist change and seek to control the future through inherited privilege. Selene and Michael, by contrast, represent disruption, new bloodlines, new ideas, and rebellion against predetermined roles. In a period when questions of political legacy, dynasties, and elite control were surfacing in real-world debates, the film's subtext carried more weight than it might seem at first glance. The making of Underworld, Evolution was a complex and ambitious endeavor that blended high-concept mythology with practical effects, stylized action, and world-building on an international scale. As the second film in the franchise, it had the advantage of a pre-established visual and narrative identity, but with that came the challenge of expanding the world in meaningful ways while delivering a sequel that felt fresh and substantial. Director Len Wiseman returned to helm the film, having co-created the Underworld universe with screenwriter Danny McBride and producer Kevin Greviou. This consistency in creative leadership allowed the film to maintain thematic continuity while pushing the production values and cinematic scope well beyond the first installment. The production was a multinational effort. Filming primarily took place in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, known for its versatile landscapes, efficient production infrastructure, and generous tax incentives. The region offered dense forests, icy mountain ranges, and Gothic urban environments that helped portray the film's dark and mythic world. One of the most visually striking filming locations was the ice-covered fortress, where Alexander Corvinus resides. This location was crafted using a blend of real sets, digital effects, and carefully chosen natural environments, combining practical elements with CGI enhancements to create the illusion of a centuries-old stronghold carved into frozen wilderness. The production team worked tirelessly to blend these elements so that the supernatural world would feel grounded and tangible. Len Wiseman's directorial style placed heavy emphasis on visual atmosphere and dynamic movement. He wanted every frame to communicate tone, tension, and texture. This was achieved through strategic use of lighting, shadows, and camera motion. For action sequences, Wiseman preferred to use a mix of practical stunt work and visual effects, rather than relying solely on CGI. Kate Beckinsale, known for her disciplined approach to acting and physical preparation, performed many of her own stunts. She trained extensively in martial arts and weapons handling, enabling her to execute complex sequences with grace and precision. Her scenes were often choreographed to maximize both realism and visual flair, combining wirework, acrobatics, and practical explosions. One of the most challenging sequences for Beckinsale was the helicopter escape, which required her to balance agility and emotional intensity in a confined, high-tension setting. Scott Speedman also committed to physically demanding preparation. His hybrid character, Michael, required the portrayal of transformation, both emotional and physical. For the scenes in which he undergoes transformation into the vampire-werewolf hybrid, a combination of makeup effects and digital enhancements were used. Speedman spent hours in the makeup chair to achieve the semi-transformed look, with prosthetics applied to his face, hands, and torso. The final stages of transformation were completed using CGI, though much of the performance relied on Speedman's physical acting and subtle use of posture, breathing, and eye movement to show Michael's internal struggle. The goal was to avoid making him appear simply monstrous. Instead, the character was designed to elicit empathy while still evoking primal power. Tony Curran, who portrayed Markus, underwent some of the most intense makeup and effects work in the entire production. His character required a blend of regal appearance and horrifying mutation, particularly in his winged form. For scenes in which Markus flies or uses his wings as weapons, Curran wore a motion capture rig that tracked his physical movements. These were then translated into the winged CGI form. Curran spent extensive time with the stunt team to ensure his movements could be replicated in post-production without losing realism. His transformation sequence, where Markus is revealed in his full mutated state, was one of the most complex visual effects achievements in the film. It involved layering multiple passes of digital animation over live-action footage, which required precise timing and coordination between actors and effects supervisors. Director Len Wiseman and his team placed a strong emphasis on practical effects wherever possible. The creature designs were developed by Patrick Tatopoulos, a renowned creature designer known for his work on films such as Independence Day and Godzilla. Tatopoulos returned from the first Underworld film to design even more grotesque and powerful versions of werewolves and vampires. William Corvinus, the original werewolf, was perhaps the most elaborate creature in the film. The suit worn by Brian Steele was a combination of animatronics, foam latex, and puppeteering elements. It required a team of effects artists to operate, ensuring that William's movements felt organic and terrifying. The decision to use a physical suit rather than a fully CGI monster gave the creature weight and realism that enhanced the horror and action elements of the film. The film's use of miniature models also deserves mention. Certain architectural elements, such as the vampire stronghold and the ancient tombs, were created using detailed scale models and then integrated into shots using digital compositing. This approach allowed for a high level of detail and control over camera angles, lighting, and destruction sequences. It also provided a tactile quality to the environments that fully digital settings often lack. These choices reflect the production team's desire to blend old-school filmmaking techniques with modern technology to create a unique and immersive world. Costume and production design played a critical role in grounding the characters within their mythological roles. Costume designer Wendy Partridge returned to outfit characters in a style that blended Gothic elegance with modern utility. Selene's outfit, composed primarily of black leather and corseted armor, was designed to be both functional for combat and symbolic of her stoic, isolated persona. Subtle design changes were made for evolution to reflect Selene's growth as a character. Her costume became slightly more streamlined and durable, representing her transition from enforcer to rebel. Markus and the vampire elders wore more elaborate, almost ecclesiastical garments that visually emphasized their age, authority, and connection to ancient traditions. These choices were not merely aesthetic. They helped define character hierarchies, relationships, and even emotional states. Production also faced several logistical challenges. Filming in cold, remote locations made for difficult shooting conditions, especially during action scenes that involved wirework or prosthetics. Actors and crew members had to contend with icy terrain, long night shoots, and the technical demands of syncing practical effects with digital enhancements. Weather unpredictability sometimes delayed outdoor shoots or required last-minute location changes. Despite these obstacles, the production team managed to maintain visual consistency, thanks in part to the expertise of cinematographer Simon Duggan, who worked closely with Wiseman to ensure that every shot contributed to the film's overall tone and narrative momentum. Underworld. Evolution continues directly from the events of the first film and builds upon the complex mythology established in the original. It deepens the narrative by exploring the origins of the vampire and Lycan bloodlines, the history of the Corvinus family, and the existential transformation of its two main protagonists, Selene and Michael. At its core, the story is both a chase film and a dark fantasy epic, blending Gothic horror elements with fast-paced action and a heavy dose of mythology. The film's narrative structure is nonlinear at times, with flashbacks used strategically to reveal important backstory and character motivations. Despite its complexity, the plot maintains a clear forward momentum, driven by a sense of urgency and conflict that escalates as the characters uncover deeper layers of the truth. The film opens with a flashback to the year 1202, establishing a key historical event in the Underworld mythos. In this prologue, we see the vampire elder Viktor leading a brutal assault on a village where William, the first and most dangerous werewolf, is hiding. This sequence is essential not just for setting the tone but for laying the foundation of the film's central conflict, the containment of ancient, primal power. The prologue introduces Alexander Corvinus' sons, Markus and William, and hints at the consequences of their immortal bloodlines. It establishes a theme that runs through the film, the attempt to control the uncontrollable and the moral consequences of such efforts. From the past, the story shifts to the present day, picking up right after the events of the first Underworld film. Selene and Michael are on the run, fugitives from both the vampire and Lycan factions. Michael, now a vampire-Lycan hybrid, is struggling to understand his transformation and what it means for his identity. Selene, meanwhile, is grappling with the realization that she has betrayed her own kind by killing Viktor, a vampire elder she once served loyally. These early scenes focus on the emotional fallout of their actions, while also setting the stage for new threats. The narrative wastes no time in introducing Markus Corvinus, who has awakened from his crypt and is revealed to be a far more powerful and dangerous entity than any character encountered so far. Markus's goal is simple but destructive. He wants to free his brother William, whom Viktor imprisoned centuries earlier. As the first vampire, Markus possesses unique abilities, including the power to absorb memories and information by drinking blood. This ability becomes a key narrative device, as it allows him to piece together Selene and Michael's movements and secrets. The film uses this technique as a way to deliver exposition organically, showing the audience past events through Markus's point of view rather than relying solely on dialogue. The middle portion of the film functions as a dual pursuit. Selene and Michael are trying to uncover the truth about their pasts, particularly Selene's repressed memories involving her family's murder and Viktor's betrayal. At the same time, Markus is hunting them to recover the key that will unlock William's prison. This structure creates constant tension, with the protagonists forced to stay on the move, never sure who they can trust. Along the way, they encounter Andreas Tanis, an exiled vampire historian who becomes a pivotal source of information. Tanis reveals the hidden history of the Corvinus bloodline and explains how Alexander Corvinus, the immortal patriarch, sired both Markus and William, leading to the eventual creation of the vampire and Lycan species. This revelation is a major turning point in the narrative. It reframes everything the characters thought they knew about their world, introducing Alexander as a kind of god figure who has remained in the shadows, observing but never interfering. Selene and Michael's journey now shifts from one of survival to one of existential discovery. They are not merely players in a war between species, they are part of an ancient lineage that may hold the key to changing the future of their world. This deepening of the mythology is one of the film's narrative strengths, turning what could have been a straightforward action sequel into a more layered exploration of legacy and power. The pacing of the film is relentless, but controlled. Action scenes are interspersed with moments of introspection and dialogue that allow the audience to absorb new information and emotional shifts. The story rarely lingers in one location for too long, emphasizing the feeling of constant pursuit and urgency. This momentum is mirrored by the characters themselves, who are often forced to make difficult decisions on the fly, driven more by instinct and emotion than by careful planning. The chase leads them to Alexander Corvinus' ship, where another major narrative shift occurs. Alexander's introduction is handled with solemnity and gravitas. As portrayed by Jacobi, he is calm, wise, and burdened by the choices he has made. He represents a neutral force, one who sees the dangers of both the vampire and Lycan species, but refuses to interfere, believing that balance must be maintained naturally. However, upon witnessing the consequences of Viktor's and Markus's actions, he ultimately decides to intervene, but not before empowering Selene with a transfusion of his blood, giving her the ability to stand against Markus and potentially William. This act sets the stage for the climactic sequence of the film, in which Selene and Michael race to prevent Markus from freeing William. The final act unfolds at an ancient, secluded prison where William has been kept for centuries. The setting is grim, remote, and richly atmospheric, designed to evoke the sense of confronting an ancient evil buried beneath layers of time and secrecy. The narrative converges all its threads here: Selene's transformation, Michael's hybrid power, Markus's obsession with his brother, and Alexander's final gift of agency. The climax is both emotional and action-driven. Markus succeeds in freeing William, and chaos erupts as the two ancient brothers wreak havoc. Selene and Michael fight for their lives and for the future of their kind. The film uses the action here not just for spectacle, but to resolve emotional arcs. Selene must confront the legacy of the vampire elders, choosing to define her identity on her own terms. Michael must embrace his hybrid nature to defeat William, showing that his uniqueness is not a curse, but a strength. The final battle between Selene and Markus is brutal and personal, driven by more than just survival. It's about choosing the future over the past, liberation over domination. The narrative concludes with both protagonists surviving, but changed. Selene, now stronger and more self-assured, steps into a new role as a leader, no longer bound by the dogma of the vampire coven. Michael, having proven his loyalty and strength, stands beside her not just as a romantic partner, but as an equal force. The final scene suggests the possibility of peace, but leaves enough ambiguity for future conflicts, acknowledging that the world of Underworld is far from finished. Underworld, Evolution is more than just a visually arresting action film. Beneath its stylish veneer and intense supernatural battles lies a rich tapestry of themes and symbols that reflect deeper philosophical, emotional, and societal concerns. The film explores ideas of legacy, power, identity, transformation, and rebellion, threading them through the narrative in ways both overt and subtle. By engaging with these themes, the movie elevates its genre roots and invites viewers to consider the personal and existential dilemmas of its characters, even within the context of a dark fantasy world filled with vampires and werewolves. One of the film's most central themes is the conflict between destiny and self-determination. The characters in Underworld, Evolution are all grappling with the weight of their inherited identities. Selene is a vampire death dealer, created and shaped by a centuries-old hierarchy that values obedience and purity of blood. Michael is a newly transformed hybrid, forced to accept a power he never asked for, and hunted by both sides. Markus and William, the first vampire and werewolf, are cursed with immortality and shaped by the uncontrollable forces of their origin. These characters are not just fighting external enemies, they are at war with the roles they were born into. The film asks whether it is possible to break free of the past and redefine oneself, or whether legacy is a prison from which there is no escape. Selene's journey is the clearest expression of this theme. Throughout the film, she is haunted by memories of her family's murder at the hands of Viktor, the elder she once revered. These memories are not just painful, they're foundational to her identity. When she discovers that her past was built on lies, she is forced to reevaluate everything she believes. Her decision to turn against the vampire elders and ally with Michael is not just a tactical move, it is a symbolic rejection of her inherited role. Her eventual empowerment through Alexander Corvinus's blood represents the birth of a new self, one no longer defined by servitude or vengeance, but by purpose and autonomy. Transformation is another dominant theme in the film. Physical transformation, through turning into vampires, lycans, or hybrids, is a constant visual and narrative element. However, these transformations are more than just biological. They represent internal change, the painful evolution of identity. Michael's transformation into a hybrid is especially significant, as it symbolizes the potential for reconciliation between opposing forces. He embodies a new kind of being, one that challenges the rigid boundaries that have kept vampires and lycans at war for centuries. His very existence threatens the established order, and his struggle is not just physical, but existential. Michael's journey represents the discomfort and potential of change, the idea that new forms of life and identity can emerge from conflict. The film also engages with the theme of power and corruption. The vampire and Lycan hierarchies are rigid and authoritarian, based on ancient bloodlines and enforced through violence. Viktor's decision to imprison William and suppress the truth about the Corvinus bloodline was rooted in a desire to control the narrative and maintain power. Markus's resurrection and quest to free his brother is not simply about familial loyalty, it is about reclaiming dominance and reshaping the world in his image. His actions illustrate the dangers of absolute power and the delusion that comes with believing oneself to be a god or savior. Alexander Corvinus, in contrast, represents a different kind of power, quiet, watchful, and detached. His refusal to interfere until the very end speaks to the moral complexity of intervention. Should those with the power to change the world act, or should they let nature take its course? His final decision to empower Selene instead of acting directly is a nuanced commentary on leadership, legacy, and the passing of responsibility to the next generation. Symbolism is woven throughout the film, often through visual cues and mythological references. Blood is perhaps the most potent symbol in the film. It represents life, lineage, memory, and power. Blood is used to transfer knowledge, to awaken ancient beings, to mutate biology, and to bind characters to their fate. Selene's exposure to Corvinus's blood grants her strength and access to hidden truths. Markus's ability to absorb memories through blood reflects the idea that history is inscribed within us, that we carry the past in our veins, whether we want to or not. Blood as a symbol also speaks to the notion of purity versus hybridity. The vampire's obsession with bloodlines mirrors real-world issues of class, race, and heritage, challenging the idea that purity equates to superiority. The setting of the film also carries symbolic weight. Much of the story unfolds in ancient ruins, remote fortresses, and icy wilderness. These spaces are not just dramatic backdrops, they reflect the emotional and psychological states of the characters. The ice-covered prison where William is held symbolizes the suppression of primal instincts, frozen in time but never truly gone. The vampire coven's decadent halls represent the decay of aristocracy and the hollowness of legacy. The contrast between light and darkness is a constant visual motif, used not just to establish mood but to represent internal conflict. Characters are often half-lit, shrouded in shadow or emerging from darkness, reflecting their uncertain moral paths and the struggle between what they were and what they are becoming. There's also a strong theme of rebellion against tradition. The vampire elders, Markus included, embody a world built on rigid hierarchy and ancient dogma. Selene and Michael's actions, especially in killing Viktor and standing against Markus, are acts of revolution. Their love, itself a taboo within the established order, is a form of rebellion. In this way, the film aligns itself with narratives of resistance, the idea that outdated systems must fall to make way for something new. This rebellion is not without cost, but it is necessary for growth. The ending of the film, which sees Selene empowered and free from her old allegiances, suggests that a new world is possible, but only through struggle and sacrifice. The relationship between Selene and Michael also contains symbolic meaning. Their union represents the possibility of harmony between opposing forces. She is cold, calculated, and bound by duty. He is emotional, impulsive, and caught between two worlds. Together, they balance each other. Their growing connection throughout the film is not just romantic, it's a metaphor for integration, the idea that wholeness comes from embracing complexity rather than denying it. Their partnership challenges the binaries that dominate their world: vampire versus Lycan, past versus future, control versus freedom. The visual style and cinematography of Underworld, Evolution are essential to its identity as a film. From the very first frame, the audience is immersed in a world that feels ancient, cold, and beautifully menacing. The look of the film is more than just aesthetic, it's thematic. Every camera movement, lighting choice, and color palette decision serves a narrative function, reinforcing the emotional tone, deepening the mythology, and visually distinguishing the Underworld universe from other contemporary fantasy and action films. At the heart of the film's visual identity is its signature color palette, dominated by icy blues, gunmetal grays, deep blacks, and muted silvers. This subdued spectrum creates an atmosphere of cold detachment, mystery, and decay. Unlike other genre films that might opt for bright, saturated visuals or rapid, disorienting editing, Underworld, Evolution maintains a controlled and cohesive aesthetic throughout. The cold hues symbolize both the emotional distance of the vampire world and the eternal nature of the ancient conflict at the film's center. The absence of warmth in the color palette mirrors the internal isolation experienced by characters like Selene, Markus, and even Michael, who are all struggling with loss, betrayal, or transformation. The cinematography, led by Duggan, is deliberate and atmospheric. Duggan employs smooth tracking shots, slow-motion sequences, and sweeping crane movements to emphasize the grandeur and mythic quality of the world. Wide-angle lenses are often used to showcase Gothic architecture, expansive landscapes, and massive interiors that feel like cathedrals or tombs. These compositions give the world a sense of scale and age, reinforcing the idea that the audience is witnessing a war that has lasted for centuries. Close-ups, on the other hand, are used sparingly and effectively, often during moments of emotional revelation or intense physical confrontation. In these scenes, the camera lingers on the actor's eyes or subtle expressions, reminding the viewer that beneath the immortality and violence, these characters carry deep emotional burdens. Lighting plays a vital role in setting the tone of each scene. Much of the film is shot in low light, with heavy use of shadows, backlighting, and diffused glows. Torchlight, candlelight, and blue-tinged moonlight are recurring sources of illumination, giving scenes a surreal and ethereal quality. This choice not only adds to the Gothic aesthetic but also creates a world that seems permanently trapped between night and nightmare. The interplay between light and shadow reflects the character's internal struggles. Selene, in particular, is often lit in ways that accentuate her pale features and dark clothing, enhancing her spectral, almost tragic presence. Conversely, Markus is frequently shown emerging from darkness or bathed in sickly yellow or red light, hinting at his corruption and growing monstrosity. Special effects and camera techniques work together to elevate the action sequences beyond simple spectacle. One of the most notable techniques used throughout the film is stylized slow motion, a hallmark of director Len Wiseman's approach. This is not used arbitrarily, but to emphasize specific moments. Bullets flying through the air, a character leaping across a room, a werewolf transformation in progress. These slow-motion sequences are choreographed like ballets of violence, giving the audience time to appreciate the physical detail and gravity of each movement. The action is tightly framed and carefully edited, allowing viewers to follow the choreography clearly, in contrast to the shaky cam techniques popular in other action films of the time. Transformations between human, vampire, and werewolf are visually stunning and symbolically rich. The cinematography highlights these changes with tight camera angles and shifting focus, emphasizing the pain and physical distortion involved in metamorphosis. Unlike other fantasy films that rely on quick cuts to hide the effects process, Underworld, evolution often lingers on the transition, allowing the audience to fully absorb the strangeness and brutality of becoming something other than human. These visual moments serve not just as thrills, but as narrative beats, underlining the irreversible nature of the characters' choices and fates. Set design and cinematography are intimately connected throughout the film. The locations, whether it's a remote monastery, an ancient crypt, a snowy forest, or a steel and glass medical facility, are filmed in ways that emphasize their history and mood. Old places feel ancient, haunted by time and memory. Modern locations feel sterile, temporary, and fragile in comparison. This contrast between the ancient and the modern is a recurring visual motif. The vampire world is steeped in antiquity, with towering stone structures, Gothic arches, and candlelit halls. In contrast, scenes involving humans or modern science are typically colder and more sterile, with fluorescent lighting and minimalist design. The camera adjusts its rhythm and framing based on the environment, moving slowly and reverently in ancient spaces and more urgently in modern or action-filled locations. Another key aspect of the film's visual language is its symbolic use of framing. Characters are often placed in doorways, arches, or at the end of long corridors. These visual elements suggest the passage of time, thresholds between worlds, or decisions that cannot be undone. When Selene discovers hidden truths about her past, she is often framed against backdrops that suggest both vulnerability and destiny, open fields, empty corridors, or moonlit ruins. Michael, as the hybrid, is frequently shown in transition spaces, between shadow and light, between architecture and nature, or surrounded by ambiguous forms. These choices support the film's thematic preoccupations with transformation, identity, and forbidden knowledge. Camera movement in Underworld. Evolution is often fluid and graceful, even in moments of violence. The camera glides through action rather than jerking or bouncing, suggesting an almost otherworldly detachment. This gives the film a dreamlike quality, enhancing the idea that we are watching beings who are not bound by human limitations. Even in hand-to-hand combat scenes, the cinematography avoids confusion by clearly establishing spatial geography and using longer takes than is typical for the genre. This clarity allows the viewer to appreciate the choreography and the performer's physical commitment. Visual motifs are another element that ties the film together. The use of reflective surfaces, mirrors, water, glass, appears throughout the movie and often accompanies moments of self-realization or transformation. When characters see themselves reflected, They are usually on the verge of discovering something profound or making a critical decision. Water, in particular, is a recurring motif. It appears in underground tunnels, in the frozen prison of William, and in moments of rebirth or purification. It suggests the unconscious, the buried past, and the fluid nature of identity. Fire is used sparingly but effectively, usually as a symbol of destruction or revelation. When fire appears, it tends to signify irreversible change, such as the destruction of a sanctuary or the death of a character. The auditory experience of Underworld. Evolution is as integral to its impact as its visual elements. The film's soundtrack and sound design work together to construct a dark, immersive world that is both menacing and emotionally resonant. Whether it's the haunting score that underscores Selene's moments of introspection or the bone-crushing, visceral sound effects during the film's violent confrontations, every audio element contributes to the atmosphere and narrative. The soundscape of the movie is layered, textured, and intentional, elevating the experience from a straightforward supernatural action thriller to a cinematic world with its own musical and sonic identity. The original score was composed by Marco Beltrami, a veteran of genre films who brought a refined and emotionally intelligent touch to the movie's sound. His work on Underworld. Evolution is marked by a delicate balance between orchestral grandeur and electronic minimalism. The music never overwhelms the visuals, but rather underscores them with subtlety and nuance. Beltrami's score integrates elements of Gothic classical composition with modern digital textures, mirroring the film's thematic fusion of ancient myth and contemporary storytelling. This hybrid sound design complements the narrative's themes of legacy, transformation, and the collision between old and new worlds. The main themes of the score are carefully designed to reflect the internal struggles and evolving dynamics of the central characters. Selene's musical motif, for instance, is subdued yet melancholic, often conveyed through minor key strings, soft piano lines, or ambient drones. It evokes a sense of loss, isolation, and suppressed emotion. As her character grows and gains new power and autonomy, the music associated with her subtly shifts, incorporating more forceful instrumentation and richer orchestral layering. This reflects her progression from a loyal soldier to an empowered individual shaping her own fate. In contrast, Markus's musical cues are dissonant and foreboding. His scenes are underscored with heavier, darker tones, low brass, brooding cellos, and distorted electronic pulses. These elements reflect his chaotic nature and monstrous transformation. As an ancient being corrupted by ambition and rage, Markus's presence is often announced by an eerie buildup of sound that escalates into something jagged and unsettling. The music acts almost like a character itself, warning the audience of the danger he represents before he even speaks. Michael, the hybrid, has a score that often blends the sonic motifs of both Selene and Markus. His scenes are frequently backed by rhythmic tension, syncopated beats, pulsing bass, and evolving harmonies. These reflect his unstable nature and internal conflict as he struggles to control his hybrid form and understand where he belongs in a world that views him as an anomaly. When Michael and Selene are together, the music often reaches its emotional peak. Their scenes are marked by melancholic strings layered with ambient tones, suggesting a quiet intimacy amidst the chaos surrounding them. The action scenes are where the score truly intensifies, often blending orchestral strikes with industrial and electronic elements. Battle sequences feature percussive rhythms, synthetic textures, and quick tempo shifts that match the physical choreography of the fights. Unlike many action films that rely on overpowering, bombastic soundtracks during fight scenes, Underworld, Evolution allows its music to ebb and flow with the pacing of the action, creating tension and release. The soundtrack builds suspense during moments of stalking or confrontation, and then explodes during clashes, ensuring the audience remains emotionally engaged rather than simply overstimulated. The film also incorporates music from popular and underground artists, continuing the tradition set by the first Underworld film. The soundtrack album includes contributions from artists in the rock, industrial, and electronic genres, which are selectively used throughout the film. These tracks often accompany transitions, travel scenes, or introspective moments, helping to connect the film to contemporary culture while maintaining its dark, gothic aesthetic. The use of heavy guitar riffs, ambient soundscapes, and distorted vocals complements the film's tone and appeals to fans of alternative subcultures. It reinforces the film's identity as not just a vampire versus werewolf story, but as a cultural product rooted in modern goth, metal, and cyberpunk aesthetics. Beyond the music, the sound design of Underworld, Evolution is meticulously crafted. Every footstep, growl, gunshot, and transformation is engineered to feel visceral and immersive. The Lycan's roars are particularly noteworthy. Deep, guttural, and animalistic, they are constructed from a combination of wild animal recordings and synthesized effects. The result is a sound that is both primal and unnatural, befitting creatures that are neither fully man nor beast. Similarly, the vampire's movements are often accompanied by subtle whooshes, suggesting supernatural speed and agility without needing exaggerated visual cues. These small sonic details reinforce the idea that these beings operate in a world beyond human perception. Gunfights and explosions are mixed with a gritty, realistic texture. Unlike traditional Hollywood action films where every bullet sounds the same, Underworld, Evolution pays attention to the acoustics of different environments. Gunfire echoes differently in stone crypts, open fields, or metallic corridors. This attention to detail enhances the sense of space and immersion, pulling the viewer deeper into the world. When weapons clash or bodies hit the ground, the impact sounds are sharp and weighty, giving physicality to the supernatural violence. Bone breaks, flesh tears, and transformation sequences are sonically vivid, often making viewers wince, not because they see something gruesome, but because they hear it. Transformation scenes deserve special mention for their complex sound layering. When Michael or a Lycan shifts form, the sound design incorporates the crunch of bones, the stretch of sinew, and the tearing of skin. These sounds are not just for shock. They communicate the agony and violence of transformation. They remind the audience that becoming something else, in this world, is not elegant or easy. It is painful, dangerous, and permanent. The sound reinforces the film's themes of identity and bodily change in a way that no dialogue could match. Environmental sound design also plays a significant role. The settings of Underworld, Evolution are brought to life with ambient noises that reflect the emotional tenor of each location. Ancient ruins groan with the weight of time. Wind howls through icy mountain passes. The Corvinus ship creaks and echoes, filled with the resonance of secrets buried at sea. These sounds add depth to the world, turning static sets into living, breathing spaces. Even moments of silence are strategic. When the score drops away and ambient noise fades, it signals a moment of critical importance or emotional vulnerability. Silence becomes as powerful as any explosion, drawing the audience's focus to a line of dialogue or an unspoken realization. The reception and criticism of Underworld, Evolution upon its release in 2006 reflected a strong divide between general audiences and professional critics. This split is a common phenomenon with genre films, especially those that lean heavily into stylized world-building, gothic aesthetics, and supernatural lore. While the movie found a devoted audience and achieved financial success, it faced mixed to negative reviews from mainstream critics who questioned its narrative coherence and emotional depth. Still, the film's legacy, particularly within its niche, has grown over time, and its critical reassessment reflects the complexity of evaluating a film that sits between mainstream action and subcultural fantasy. Underworld, Evolution opened to commercial success, topping the box office on its debut weekend. With an opening of over $26 million domestically, the film proved that there was a viable market for dark, R-rated supernatural action thrillers. It also demonstrated that the franchise had cultivated a loyal fanbase eager to follow the continuing saga of Selene, Michael, and the ancient vampire-Lycan war. Worldwide, the film grossed over $110 million, confirming its status as a commercially successful sequel and ensuring the viability of future installments. For the studio, this was a clear sign that the Underworld universe had franchise potential beyond a single film. Critics, however, were less kind in their evaluations. Many reviews at the time focused on what they saw as the film's shortcomings in terms of narrative clarity, character development, and emotional resonance. The plot was described by several reviewers as convoluted or overly complex, with too much reliance on exposition and backstory from the first film. Critics pointed out that newcomers to the franchise would likely find it difficult to follow the intricacies of the vampire and Lycan mythology without prior knowledge of the original Underworld. This limited the accessibility of the sequel and contributed to the perception that it catered to fans rather than the broader audience. Another common critique concerned the film's tone, which some critics found unrelentingly grim or emotionally distant. The dark, desaturated visual palette, the gothic set pieces, and the serious, stoic characters were interpreted by some as lacking variation or human warmth. Dialogue was often cited as being heavy with lore and exposition, leaving little room for humor, relatability, or spontaneity. For these reviewers, the film felt more like an extended video game cutscene than a fully fleshed-out narrative experience. Even moments of intimacy or vulnerability, such as Selene and Michael's romantic connection, were seen as underdeveloped or perfunctory. Despite these criticisms, other reviewers found merit in the film's visual and technical achievements. The production design, cinematography, and special effects were often praised, even by those who did not fully connect with the story or characters. The film's commitment to its visual identity, a stark blend of gothic horror and modern action, was seen as bold and distinctive. The creature effects, especially the werewolf transformations and the monstrous form of Markus, received positive attention for their detail and execution. These elements, along with the atmospheric score, were highlighted as examples of the film's artistic ambition, even if the narrative did not always match the visual sophistication. Kate Beckinsale's performance as Selene was another aspect of the film that divided opinion. Some critics praised her for bringing gravity, physicality, and intensity to a role that could have easily been reduced to a stereotype. Her portrayal of Selene as both a fierce warrior and a woman confronting her own trauma and history added complexity to what might have otherwise been a one-dimensional action heroine. Others, however, argued that the script gave her little emotional range to work with, limiting the depth of her performance. The stoic demeanor that defined Selene in the first film was maintained in the sequel, and for some viewers, this consistency was either a strength or a missed opportunity for further development. Scott Speedman as Michael also drew mixed reviews. Some appreciated the vulnerability and confusion he brought to the role of a man caught between species and loyalties, while others felt his character was underwritten and lacked charisma. The hybrid concept intrigued many fans, but left some critics wanting a clearer arc or more defined personality traits. Meanwhile, Tony Curran's portrayal of Markus was often seen as effectively menacing, though his character's motivations were viewed as thin or overly reliant on mythological backstory. From a genre perspective, horror and fantasy outlets tended to respond more favorably to the film. These reviewers recognized the film's contributions to the vampire and werewolf mythos and its attempts to build a complex, supernatural world. They praised its stylistic consistency, its action choreography, and its dedication to expanding the franchise's lore. For fans of the first film and the broader genre Underworld, Evolution was seen as a natural and satisfying continuation that took creative risks rather than simply rehashing the original formula. In contrast, mainstream media outlets that did not specialize in genre fare were more critical, often applying traditional cinematic standards to a film that operated within a very specific niche. The lack of character-driven drama or conventional narrative structure led some reviewers to dismiss the film as style over substance. However, this criticism overlooked the fact that Underworld, Evolution was not attempting to be a traditional character drama or realist narrative. It was instead committed to creating an immersive fantasy world where themes of identity, legacy, and transformation were expressed more through atmosphere, visual symbolism, and action than dialogue or psychological realism. In the year since its release, Underworld, Evolution has undergone a degree of critical reevaluation, particularly in online communities and film forums. As attitudes toward genre cinema have shifted, The film has gained recognition for its visual ambition, its commitment to world-building, and its unique tone. While it is still divisive, many now view it as a significant entry in the development of early 2000s dark fantasy cinema. Its influence on later supernatural franchises, its contribution to the resurgence of vampire and werewolf lore, and its role in popularizing a specific blend of action, horror, and gothic romance have become more widely acknowledged. It is also worth noting that the film did not escape controversy. Some critics and viewers raised concerns about the glorification of violence and the depiction of certain romantic or sexual dynamics that appeared rushed or lacking in emotional context. The scene of intimacy between Selene and Michael, for instance, while applauded by some as a moment of connection, was criticized by others for feeling emotionally detached or overly stylized. These reactions speak to broader debates about the depiction of sexuality, agency, and emotion in genre films that prioritize atmosphere and mythology over character development. Underworld. Evolution may not have been a critical darling upon release, but its long-term legacy and influence across various media and pop culture spheres are undeniable. As the second installment in a franchise that would go on to produce multiple sequels, merchandise, and a loyal fanbase, the film played a pivotal role in shaping the tone, direction, and aesthetic identity of the Underworld universe. Beyond confines of its own series, the film also contributed to a broader resurgence of interest in supernatural action cinema and helped define a specific stylistic movement within early 2000s genre filmmaking, one that combined gothic horror, sleek futurism, and mythological storytelling with stylized violence and philosophical undertones. One of the most immediate impacts of Underworld evolution was the way it cemented the franchise as a serious contender in the supernatural action genre. The first Underworld film introduced audiences to the war between vampires and Lycans, but the sequel expanded the universe significantly, delving into the origins of both species, introducing the ancient Corvinus bloodline, and elevating the conflict to mythological proportions. By building such an expansive lore, the film laid the groundwork for future sequels and prequels, including Underworld, Rise of the Lycans, 2009, Underworld, Awakening, 2012, and Underworld, Blood Wars, 2016. Without the ambitious world-building and deepening mythology of evolution, these later entries would have had far less narrative and thematic material to explore. The film's influence can also be seen in how it popularized a certain visual and tonal style that became emblematic of mid-2000s dark fantasy. Its cold blue-gray color palette, sharp costume designs, slow-motion gunplay, and digitally enhanced creature transformations became a blueprint for other filmmakers trying to marry horror and action with a modern, edgy sensibility. Films like Resident Evil, Extinction, Priest, Van Helsing, and Daywatch borrowed from this visual language, reinforcing the demand for films that straddled the line between horror mythology and sleek, kinetic storytelling. Television shows such as The Vampire Diaries, Penny Dreadful, and even Supernatural also adopted aspects of Underworld's grim aesthetic and morally ambiguous portrayal of monsters. In gaming culture, Underworld evolution made its mark as well. While there were no major video games released specifically as tie-ins, the influence of the franchise could be felt in the design and tone of action horror games that followed. Titles such as Devil May Cry, Castlevania, Lords of Shadow, and even parts of the Witcher series reflect some of the same atmospheric gloom, hybrid mythologies, and morally complex protagonists that the Underworld series explored. In particular, the idea of a powerful but tormented warrior, part human, part supernatural, became a recurring archetype in games and graphic novels following the film's success. On a more cultural level, Underworld evolution played a role in reigniting mainstream interest in vampire and werewolf lore, paving the way for other media to reimagine these creatures in new ways. While the Twilight Saga would offer a more romanticized and teen-oriented take on similar themes, the success of the Underworld franchise showed Hollywood that there was still a strong appetite for monster mythology with a modern twist. Where Twilight embraced light and longing, Underworld embraced darkness, vengeance, and ancient rivalries, demonstrating the genre's range and marketability. The film also had a lasting impact on the depiction of female action heroes. Selene, played by Kate Beckinsale, became an enduring symbol of strength, resilience, and intensity. Her character helped shift perceptions of what a female lead could look like in action films, gritty, complex, and emotionally armored, rather than overly sexualized or relegated to secondary roles. The character of Selene inspired cosplayers, fan fiction writers, and audiences looking for more female representation in genre cinema. Her influence is apparent in later characters like Alice in the Resident Evil series, Abby in The Last of Us Part 2, or Imperator Furiosa in Mad Max, Fury Road, all of whom reflect a growing demand for fierce, capable women at the center of violent, chaotic narratives. Merchandising and brand extensions also contributed to the film's cultural footprint. While Underworld, Evolution did not spawn a massive merchandising empire, it did produce a line of action figures, collector's items, clothing, and DVDs with extensive behind-the-scenes content. These products, targeted toward fans of gothic fashion, alternative culture, and fantasy horror, allowed the movie to maintain visibility long after its theatrical run. DVD and Blu-ray sales were particularly strong, aided by the home entertainment boom of the mid-2000s. The expanded features and director commentary helped build a deeper connection between the creators and the audience, encouraging analysis and fan engagement beyond the initial viewing. Online fan communities also played a large role in sustaining the film's legacy. Platforms like LiveJournal, early forums, and later Reddit and Tumblr were filled with fan theories, character analyses, and discussions about the Underworld lore. Fan art, GIFs, memes, and even crossover content with other franchises such as Blade, Matrix, or Resident Evil reflected the desire to keep this universe alive in the imagination of its audience. The character relationships, particularly the bond between Selene and Michael, were frequently explored in fanfiction and online roleplay communities, further extending the emotional reach of the story. Academically, Underworld, Evolution has appeared in discussions of gender, genre, and mythology. Scholars have analyzed it through the lens of postmodern vampire narratives, exploring its themes of hybridity, identity, and genetic legacy. The film's portrayal of vampires and werewolves as scientifically engineered rather than purely supernatural creatures opened up new lines of analysis about the intersection of biology, power, and tradition in genre storytelling. This approach influenced other narratives that sought to reframe monsters not as curses or metaphysical entities, but as products of evolution, experimentation, or ancient science gone wrong. Perhaps most enduringly, the film solidified the idea that sequels could deepen mythology rather than simply repeat plot beats. Rather than just rehashing the vampire-Lycan conflict in a new location, Underworld, Evolution expanded the timeline, introduced new historical layers, and gave new context to the characters' motivations. This storytelling choice raised the bar for future sequels in genre franchises, setting a precedent for world expansion as a legitimate narrative goal. Films and franchises like John Wick, The Conjuring universe, and Fantastic Beasts have followed similar patterns, using the second or third installment to delve into deeper lore and historical backstories rather than relying solely on forward momentum. The reflection and interpretation of Underworld, Evolution by its audiences reveal a rich tapestry of emotional engagement, thematic resonance, and subcultural identification that went far beyond box office statistics or critical reviews. For many viewers, particularly fans of gothic fiction, supernatural lore, and dark action cinema, the film was more than just entertainment. It was a visual and emotional experience that captured a specific tone and worldview. The way people responded to the film reflected their own desires, fears, and fascinations, and these reactions help explain why the film has remained popular in genre communities long after its theatrical run. One of the most prominent reflections from audiences was the appreciation for the immersive world the film built. Viewers were drawn into a universe where centuries-long wars between vampires and werewolves played out across shadowy cities and ancient castles. Fans frequently expressed admiration for how seriously the film took its own mythology, offering a richly detailed backstory that gave the fantasy elements weight and coherence. For many, this deep lore was not a barrier to entry, but rather a compelling invitation to dive deeper. Discussions on fan forums and social media, were often focused on piecing together timelines, understanding the Corvinus bloodline, and speculating about unseen elements of the war between species. This depth of world-building sparked a kind of participatory engagement from viewers. Audiences didn't just watch Underworld, Evolution, they inhabited it. Fan fiction, art, and role-playing communities emerged quickly after the film's release, with users creating new vampire clans, hybrid species, or spin-off stories set within the same universe. This active reimagining of the story reflected how audiences internalized the film's world as something they could expand and explore on their own terms. In doing so, the film became a shared space of creativity, identity, and expression. On a more personal level, many audience members connected deeply with the film's characters, particularly Selene. Her cold exterior, emotional wounds, and complex sense of loyalty resonated with people who felt alienated or misunderstood. She was not the typical heroine of early 2000s action films. She was dark, morally complex, and driven by past trauma rather than external approval. Viewers, especially women and members of alternative subcultures, identified with her sense of isolation and inner conflict. Selene became a symbol of strength in vulnerability, a reminder that one could be both damaged and powerful, both hunted and heroic. The romantic connection between Selene and Michael also inspired strong audience reactions. Rather than being a traditional love story, their bond was rooted in shared exile and transformation. They were both caught between worlds, burdened with legacies they didn't ask for, and trying to define themselves amid chaos and violence. For many fans, this made their relationship more emotionally authentic than typical cinematic romances. It was less about flirtation or attraction and more about survival, trust, and understanding. The hybrid nature of Michael and the idea of Selene becoming something new herself by the end of the film resonated with viewers who felt like outsiders or hybrids in their own lives, between cultures, identities, or belief systems. Generationally, the film spoke strongly to millennials and older Gen Z audiences who were coming of age during a time of social and technological change. The early 2000s were marked by anxieties about identity, control, and legacy, and Underworld. Evolution tapped into these themes in a visceral way. The film's focus on ancient bloodlines, hidden truths, and the consequences of forbidden power mirrored real-world concerns about authority, history, and self-determination. The tension between the old vampire order and the new hybrid potential of Michael and Selene reflected broader generational conflicts between tradition and innovation, legacy and reinvention. The film's aesthetic also struck a deep chord with viewers, particularly those involved in alternative fashion, goth culture, and cyberpunk fandoms. The sleek black costumes, blue-tinged cinematography, and industrial soundtrack created a mood that audiences embraced and emulated. Selene's look, in particular, leather trench coat, corset-like armor, icy gaze, became iconic in goth and cosplay circles. Fans would recreate her costume at conventions, photo shoots, and Halloween events, reflecting not just admiration but identification. Her appearance wasn't just cool, it was empowering. It gave viewers a visual language for expressing their own identity. For many LGBTQ+ viewers, the themes of transformation, dual identity, and social exclusion carried a metaphorical resonance. The idea of hiding one's true nature, being part of a secret world, and navigating societal rejection mirrored real struggles with self-acceptance and belonging. While the film doesn't explicitly explore queer themes, its narrative structure and character arcs provided an allegorical canvas for viewers to project their own experiences onto. In online spaces, queer fans often discuss the metaphorical nature of vampirism and hybridity as symbols of otherness and self-discovery. Not all audience reflections were uncritical, however. Some viewers expressed frustration with the film's pacing or complexity, especially those who hadn't seen the first installment. The dense exposition and rapid-fire lore could feel overwhelming, and the film's commitment to its internal mythology sometimes came at the expense of emotional accessibility. Others found the relationship between Selene and Michael to be underdeveloped or abrupt, wishing for more dialogue and emotional build-up to their eventual intimacy. These critiques reflected a desire for more balance between action and character development, a common challenge in genre sequels. Still, even among those who had critiques, there was a prevailing respect for the film's ambition and mood. Many viewers recognized that Underworld, Evolution was not trying to appeal to everyone. It was unapologetically niche, deeply stylized, and emotionally restrained. For some, this was alienating. For others, it was precisely what made the film so compelling. It treated its audience as intelligent, invested, and willing to engage with complex themes. It did not talk down to viewers or simplify its mythology for mass appeal. In the years following its release, fan interpretations have only grown more nuanced. Viewers have drawn connections between the film and real-world historical cycles, particularly the idea of old power structures resisting change. The vampire elders, desperate to maintain their ancient rule, are seen as stand-ins for authoritarian systems, while Selene and Michael represent the disruptive power of hybridity, evolution, and rebellion. Some have even interpreted the Corvinus bloodline as a metaphor for generational trauma, how the past shapes the present, and how new generations must decide whether to carry forward the legacy or transform it. Underworld, Evolution is a film that thrives not just on its visual spectacle and action sequences, but on the complex development and transformation of its central characters. The narrative is propelled by the evolving identities, motivations, and relationships of key figures, particularly Selene, Michael Corvin, and Markus Corvinus. Their character arcs intertwine with the broader themes of legacy, power, and self-discovery, offering viewers a layered exploration of personal growth amid mythic conflict. At the heart of the story is Selene, the vampire death dealer whose journey embodies the tension between duty and personal awakening. At the beginning of the film, Selene is a highly trained and stoic warrior, completely loyal to the Vampire Elder Council and focused on eradicating the Lycans, whom she views as mortal enemies. Her identity is largely defined by this black-and-white view of good versus evil. However, as the film progresses, Selene's worldview is challenged. The revelation of the true origins of the vampire and Lycan species, the betrayal by vampire elders, and the emergence of Michael as a powerful hybrid force Selene to question everything she believed about her world and her role within it. Selene's character arc is one of transformation from a loyal soldier into a self-aware individual capable of questioning authority and choosing her own path. She evolves from being reactive and bound by loyalty to becoming proactive and independent. Her emotions, initially repressed, begin to surface, particularly through her protective feelings toward Michael and her conflicted feelings about the vampire elder's deception. This growth is visually reflected in her appearance as well, with her wardrobe becoming slightly less rigid and her demeanor showing moments of vulnerability amidst the relentless action. Michael Corvin, the hybrid vampire-Lycan, undergoes a rapid but significant evolution himself. Introduced as a relatively ordinary human in the first film, Michael's character is developed here as someone caught between two worlds. His transformation into a hybrid is not just physical, but deeply symbolic. He represents potential, change, and the breaking of ancient cycles. His arc is one of awakening and empowerment. Unlike Selene, Michael's development is initially marked by confusion and fear as he struggles to understand his new abilities and his place in the ongoing conflict. However, he gradually embraces his dual nature, becoming a powerful and unique figure capable of challenging the old vampire and Lycan orders. Michael's journey is also a coming-of-age story in a heightened, supernatural context. He moves from a passive participant in the war to an active agent of change. His relationship with Selene further humanizes him and helps anchor his transformation emotionally. Their bond, forged through shared danger and mutual protection, also marks his evolution from isolated loner to connected partner. His growing confidence and acceptance of his hybrid identity symbolize hope for reconciliation and evolution beyond ancient enmities. Markus Corvinus, the primary antagonist and the first vampire, offers a contrasting arc. Unlike Selene and Michael, whose development is forward-looking and transformative, Markus is trapped by his own power and obsession with domination. His character is driven by pride, vengeance, and the desire to restore a lost empire of vampire supremacy. Markus's arc is one of stagnation and tragic hubris. His refusal to accept change or compromise ultimately leads to his downfall. Though powerful, Markus embodies the destructive consequences of clinging too tightly to the past. Markus's complexity lies in his motivations. While he is a villain, he is not one-dimensional. His grief over the death of his brother William and his bitterness toward the betrayal of the Corvinus legacy add layers to his personality. He is a tragic figure, a ruler who has become tyrannical out of fear of losing everything he holds dear. His clashes with Selene and Michael symbolize the broader thematic conflict between Old Order and New Evolution. The supporting cast also exhibits notable character development that complements the central arcs. Lucien, the Lycan leader from the first film, though deceased by this point, is referenced frequently as a symbol of resistance and change. His legacy influences Michael's acceptance of his Lycan side and the possibility of peace between species. Viktor and Amelia, the vampire elders, embody institutional rigidity and betrayal. Viktor's arc, in particular, is marked by his gradual realization of the consequences of his actions, though it comes too late to save him. Amelia, who was once a powerful warrior and mother, reveals a maternal vulnerability and moral conflict, adding emotional depth to the vampire side of the war. Kraven, a new vampire antagonist introduced in the sequel, serves as a foil to Selene's evolving morality. His ruthlessness and willingness to use any means necessary contrast with Selene's growing sense of justice and individuality. Kraven's character represents the dangerous extremes of power without conscience, highlighting the stakes of Selene's transformation. The dynamics between characters drive much of the film's tension and emotional weight. Selene's protective instincts toward Michael create a powerful partnership that balances strength and vulnerability. Their relationship is a catalyst for both characters' growth and a symbol of hope for a new kind of future beyond centuries of conflict. Meanwhile, the antagonistic relationships, particularly between Selene and Markus, reflect larger ideological battles about legacy, power, and identity. Character motivations are often intertwined with themes of identity and belonging. Selene struggles with where her loyalties lie, as a member of the vampire elite, as a guardian of an ancient order, or as an individual making her own choices. Michael wrestles with his dual nature, facing rejection from both vampires and Lycans, but ultimately embracing what makes him unique. Markus clings to an idealized past, refusing to adapt and paying the price. The film also explores the consequences of choice through its characters. Selene's decision to protect Michael rather than kill him marks a turning point, representing a break from blind obedience to authority. Michael's choice to embrace his hybrid nature and fight against Markus signals hope for reconciliation and change. Markus's refusal to change seals his fate as a tragic villain. The emotional arcs of the characters are complemented by their physical transformations, which serve as visual markers of their development. Michael's gradual change into a powerful hybrid is both terrifying and awe-inspiring, symbolizing the merging of two worlds. Selene's armor and weaponry, initially tools of a soldier, become extensions of her evolving identity as a protector and rebel. Markus's monstrous transformations emphasize his loss of humanity and descent into tyranny. Ultimately, Underworld. Evolution uses its characters to explore broader questions about power, identity, and legacy. The film suggests that true strength comes not from clinging to the past or seeking domination, but from embracing change, forging new identities, and breaking cycles of violence. Through the journeys of Selene, Michael, and Markus, audiences witness the tragic costs and hopeful possibilities inherent in these choices. The costume and set design in Underworld. Evolution play a crucial role in establishing the film's unique aesthetic, mood, and narrative tone. Both elements work hand in hand to create a visual world that is dark, immersive, and consistent with the film's gothic and modern hybrid themes. The attention to detail in these areas contributes to the storytelling by visually defining characters, underscoring thematic elements, and building an atmospheric environment that supports the supernatural conflicts at the heart of the film. Starting with costume design, Underworld. Evolution continues the franchise's signature look, blending Gothic elements with sleek, futuristic aesthetics. The costumes are predominantly black, creating a stark and stylish visual identity that conveys both danger and elegance. The leather and latex materials used for the characters' outfits reflect a world that is both harsh and polished, merging traditional vampire imagery with contemporary fashion sensibilities. The costumes serve not only as protective gear for the characters, but also as symbols of their identity and roles within the vampire and Lycan societies. Selene's costume is perhaps the most iconic and carefully crafted. Her tight-fitting leather ensemble, complete with a long trench coat, corset-like bodice, and armor details, emphasizes her role as a formidable warrior and vampire death dealer. The costume blends functionality with style, allowing for fluid movement in combat scenes while projecting an aura of authority and mystery. The design also visually aligns Selene with the film's dark, sleek aesthetic, making her instantly recognizable and a symbol of vampire elegance and power. The subtle use of silver accents in her outfit hints at the ongoing vampire-Lycan conflict, as silver is traditionally deadly to werewolves. Michael Corvin's costume design contrasts with Selene's, but still aligns with the film's overall palette. Initially dressed in simpler, more casual human clothing, his outfits evolve as his character transforms. As Michael embraces his hybrid nature, his costumes incorporate darker, more fitted pieces that suggest a shift toward the vampire and Lycan worlds. This gradual change visually narrates his journey from ordinary human to powerful hybrid, bridging the gap between two species. The vampire elders, including Viktor and Amelia, wear more elaborate and regal costumes that reflect their status and age. Their garments are rich in texture, featuring layers of leather, metal, and sometimes fur, evoking an ancient nobility and authority. These costumes emphasize their role as guardians of tradition and the old vampire order. Amelia's armor, in particular, combines medieval influences with the franchise's modern sensibility, highlighting her warrior status and tragic backstory. Kraven, the ruthless vampire antagonist, sports darker, more militaristic attire that underscores his aggressive and pragmatic nature. His costumes are less ornate than the elders, focusing instead on functionality and intimidation. This design choice reinforces his role as a cold, efficient enforcer, contrasting with Selene's more elegant and heroic appearance. Lycan costumes and makeup differ significantly, emphasizing their primal, animalistic nature. The werewolves are characterized by rugged, torn clothing that suggests their savagery and connection to the wild. Their costumes and prosthetics work together to highlight the brutal, bestial aspect of their species, contrasting with the polished and controlled appearance of the vampires. This visual dichotomy reinforces the film's themes of order versus chaos and civilization versus nature. Moving to set design, the film's locations and environments reinforce the dark, Gothic atmosphere and the timeless nature of the vampire-Lycan war. The sets range from ancient castles and crypts to modern urban spaces, reflecting the ongoing conflict across centuries and blending historical and contemporary elements. The vampire strongholds are designed with an architectural style that combines Gothic and Baroque influences. High vaulted ceilings, stone walls, stained glass windows, and intricate metalwork create a sense of grandeur and history. These spaces are often dimly lit, with cold blue or green tones, evoking a haunting, otherworldly ambience. The design reflects the vampires' connection to their ancient heritage while also signaling their isolation from the modern world. In contrast, the Lycan environments are darker and more chaotic. The ruins, caves, and underground lairs inhabited by Lycans have a raw, primal feel, with rough textures, earth tones, and an oppressive atmosphere. The set design emphasizes their connection to the wild and their status as outcasts. The use of shadows and low lighting in these spaces creates a sense of danger and unpredictability. The film also utilizes modern urban settings, parking garages, alleys, and high-tech facilities that ground the story in a contemporary world. These locations highlight the secret, hidden nature of the vampire and Lycan war amidst everyday human life. The contrast between ancient castles and modern cities underscores the film's theme of timeless conflict playing out in the present day. Particularly noteworthy is the design of the Corvinus estate, a key location in the film. The estate blends Gothic architecture with modern technology, featuring sprawling stone structures alongside laboratories and high-tech equipment. This fusion visually represents the intersection of old bloodlines and new scientific understanding, central to the film's mythology about genetic heritage and hybridization. The production design team made deliberate choices in color palettes throughout the sets to reinforce the film's mood. The predominance of cool blues, blacks, and silvers creates a cold, metallic feel that complements the vampire and Lycan aesthetics. These colors also contrast with occasional warmer tones, such as the fiery red seen in battle scenes or the warm candlelight in some vampire chambers, adding emotional texture and visual interest. Lighting design works closely with the set to create dramatic and atmospheric visuals. Scenes are often lit with sharp contrasts between light and shadow, playing up the Gothic sensibility and the moral ambiguities in the story. The interplay of darkness and light mirrors the characters' internal conflicts and the hidden dangers lurking in the film's world. The use of practical effects combined with CGI and set design enhances the immersive experience. Physical sets provide tangible textures and depth, while digital effects extend environments and create fantastical elements, such as transforming characters or expansive underground chambers, seamlessly blending reality with fantasy. Costumes and sets also play a role in pacing and narrative emphasis. For example, Selene's movement through ornate vampire halls contrasts with the brutal action sequences in grimy urban or natural Lycan environments. This visual variety keeps the audience engaged and underscores shifting narrative tones, from political intrigue to primal combat. The dialogue and scriptwriting in Underworld, Evolution play a significant role in shaping the film's tone, pacing, and character development. The screenplay, written by McBride and Len Wiseman, builds on the mythology established in the first film and expands it with new revelations, heightened stakes, and emotional complexity. While the movie is often celebrated for its visual style and action sequences, the writing, particularly the dialogue, provides essential narrative structure and deepens the audience's understanding of the characters and their motivations. From the outset, the script strikes a deliberate balance between exposition, character interaction, and advancing the plot. Given the complex backstory involving ancient vampire and Lycan lineages, the dialogue often serves an explanatory function. However, the writers avoid overwhelming the audience with dry information by integrating lore organically into conversations and action. This is achieved through key scenes that reveal history via character confrontations or Selene's reflections, making the exposition feel relevant and engaging rather than purely informational. One of the script's strengths is how it uses dialogue to reveal character personality and growth. Selene's speech is typically terse, precise, and commanding, reflecting her no-nonsense warrior persona. Her lines are often delivered with controlled intensity, which conveys her internal discipline and emotional restraint. When she does show vulnerability or emotion, the dialogue shifts accordingly, allowing viewers glimpses into her evolving character. For example, her exchanges with Michael mix guardedness with hints of care, demonstrating her gradual softening and growing trust. Michael Corvin's dialogue contrasts with Selene's controlled tone. As a human-turned hybrid struggling with his new identity, his lines often express confusion, fear, and gradual acceptance. His verbal evolution mirrors his character arc, moving from uncertainty and questions about his nature to confident declarations of purpose and power. His conversations with Selene and other characters provide emotional grounding amidst the supernatural conflict, making his journey more relatable and humanized. The script also includes moments of tension and confrontation that are heightened by sharp, impactful dialogue. Scenes involving the vampire elders, especially Viktor and Amelia, showcase formal, authoritative speech that emphasizes their age, wisdom, and political power. Viktor's words often carry a cold, calculated tone that reflects his distrust and rigid adherence to vampire law. Amelia, in contrast, combines regal authority with a maternal tone, her dialogue revealing inner conflict and moral struggle. These nuanced speech patterns enrich the characters and add layers to the political dynamics within the vampire hierarchy. Markus, as the film's antagonist, delivers dialogue that is both grandiose and menacing. His lines reflect his pride, bitterness, and obsession with power and revenge. The script uses his speeches to underscore his role as a tragic villain, whose motivations are rooted in loss and a desire to reclaim a legacy. His words often carry a sense of inevitability and doom, raising the stakes and creating dramatic tension. The dialogue during his confrontations with Selene and Michael is particularly effective in highlighting the ideological and personal conflicts that drive the film's climax. Kraven's dialogue serves as a foil to the more measured speech of other vampires. His lines are often blunt, aggressive, and pragmatic, reflecting his ruthless and opportunistic nature. His speech adds a layer of threat and unpredictability, reminding the audience of the danger lurking within the vampire ranks. Humor in the script is sparingly used but effective when it appears. Given the film's dark tone, comedic moments are subtle and typically arise from character interactions rather than overt jokes. These brief instances of levity help to humanize the characters and provide relief from the tension without disrupting the mood. For example, small exchanges between Selene and Michael occasionally include dry or wry remarks that reveal their growing rapport and inject personality into their relationship. The pacing of dialogue scenes is generally well managed, ensuring that conversations move the story forward without lingering unnecessarily. Action sequences are balanced with quieter moments of dialogue that allow character reflection and exposition. This rhythm helps maintain audience engagement by varying intensity and providing narrative clarity. The screenplay also employs certain recurring motifs and phrases that reinforce themes and character relationships. For instance, references to legacy, bloodlines, and evolution recur throughout the dialogue, highlighting the film's preoccupation with heritage and change. These repeated concepts help unify the script and deepen the thematic resonance. In terms of script structure, the film follows a traditional three-act format, with the dialogue driving key plot developments and character revelations. The opening act uses dialogue to establish stakes and reintroduce the mythos, while the second act escalates conflicts through confrontational speech and strategic revelations. The third act's dialogue is more intense and urgent, culminating in the climactic showdown where characters articulate their beliefs and confront their pasts. One challenge for the writers was balancing the need for complex world-building with maintaining an accessible and engaging narrative. The dialogue largely succeeds in this, providing necessary background while avoiding overly technical or jargon-heavy explanations. This makes the film approachable for new viewers while rewarding longtime fans with deeper insight into the Underworld universe. Memorable lines from the film often encapsulate character motivations or thematic concerns. For example, Selene's assertion of loyalty, Michael's questions about identity, or Markus's declarations of power stand out as defining moments in the dialogue. These lines resonate beyond their immediate context, contributing to the film's cultural footprint. The script also carefully constructs the interplay of power dynamics through dialogue. Scenes involving negotiation, betrayal, or alliance-building showcase how language is used as a weapon or shield. Characters use dialogue not just to communicate, but to manipulate, persuade, or challenge, reflecting the political intrigue underlying the supernatural war. Overall, the dialogue in Underworld, Evolution is functional and purposeful, supporting the film's complex narrative while providing character depth. While not overly verbose or poetic, the writing achieves a tone consistent with the film's dark, brooding atmosphere. It effectively conveys emotions ranging from fear and anger to love and determination, enriching the story's emotional landscape. In summary, the scriptwriting and dialogue of Underworld, Evolution contribute significantly to the film's storytelling success. The screenplay balances exposition with character-driven conversations, using dialogue to reveal personality, advance plot, and deepen themes. Memorable lines, well-paced exchanges, and thematic motifs all serve to engage the audience and build a cohesive narrative. The writing supports the film's blend of action, mythology, and emotional drama, making the dialogue a vital element in the film's overall impact. The marketing and promotional strategies for Underworld Evolution were carefully designed to build on the success of the original Underworld film while expanding the franchise's audience and cultural footprint. The marketing campaign capitalized on the movie's distinctive Gothic aesthetic, action-packed narrative, and star power to generate excitement and anticipation ahead of its release. A combination of traditional advertising, innovative tactics, and cross-media efforts helped position the film as a must-see for fans of supernatural action and dark fantasy. From the earliest stages of promotion, the marketing team emphasized the film's continuation of the vampire-Lycan war saga, using key visuals and taglines that highlighted the evolution of this dark world. The official trailers and teaser spots introduced audiences to the film's heightened stakes and new revelations, showcasing intense fight scenes, impressive special effects, and glimpses of the deeper mythology explored in the story. These trailers struck a balance between action spectacle and character drama, appealing to both returning fans and newcomers. The poster designs played a significant role in establishing the film's visual identity in the public eye. The primary posters prominently featured Selene, portrayed by Kate Beckinsale, in her signature black leather outfit, exuding strength and mystery. The use of dark color palettes combined with sharp metallic fonts reinforced the gothic and futuristic blend central to the film's style. Other poster variants showcased the menacing figures of the Lycan warriors and vampire elders, visually setting up the central conflict. These striking images became iconic representations of the franchise, often used in cinemas, magazines, and retail locations. One innovative promotional strategy was the early use of internet marketing and fan engagement. The studio launched an official website for Underworld Evolution, which included interactive elements such as character bios, downloadable wallpapers, behind-the-scenes videos, and forums where fans could discuss the lore and share fan art. This digital presence helped cultivate a dedicated community eager for the film's release and provided a platform for viral marketing through fan word of mouth. Social media platforms, though less dominant in 2006 than today, were utilized by the marketing team to spread news and teasers. Online communities, message boards, and early social networking sites played a crucial role in building grassroots excitement. Cast interviews and featurettes were released online, offering insights into the production and deepening fan connection with the characters and actors. The marketing campaign also leveraged the star appeal of the cast. Kate Beckinsale's rising fame was a focal point, and she participated in numerous press tours, magazine covers, and talk show appearances promoting the film. Interviews often highlighted her physical preparation for the role and the character's development, drawing attention to the film's blend of action and emotional depth. Scott Speedman and Bill Nighy also took part in promotional events, adding credibility and drawing fans of their previous work. Cross-promotional partnerships extended the film's reach into various media and product categories. Video game tie-ins and downloadable content were developed, allowing fans to immerse themselves further in the Underworld universe. Merchandise such as action figures, posters, and clothing lines were released, capitalizing on the film's distinctive style and fan base. These products helped maintain visibility in the market and fostered a broader cultural presence. In addition to traditional media appearances, the studio organized special fan events and screenings that generated buzz. Preview screenings and midnight premieres attracted diehard fans and encouraged positive word of mouth. Some events included Q&A sessions with the cast and crew, providing unique opportunities for fan engagement and media coverage. The marketing also targeted specific demographics strategically. Fans of Gothic and fantasy genres were reached through specialized magazines, conventions, and online communities, while the action elements were promoted in mainstream outlets to attract a wider audience. This dual approach ensured that Underworld Evolution maintained its core fan base while expanding its appeal. International marketing efforts were tailored to suit different regions. In Europe and Asia, where vampire and supernatural lore have strong cultural resonance, the film was promoted with localized posters, dubbing, and regional press tours. The dark, stylish aesthetic appealed to global audiences interested in alternative and fantasy genres, helping the film perform well in various international markets. The use of music in trailers and promotional spots was another important tool. The soundtrack's intense, Electronic rock themes were incorporated to evoke the film's mood and energy, reinforcing the sense of a high-stakes, supernatural thriller. Selected songs from the score and licensed tracks were previewed in commercials, enhancing emotional impact and brand recognition. Merchandising also played a significant role in the promotional strategy. The release of branded clothing, including leather jackets, t-shirts featuring iconic images, and collectible items allowed fans to physically connect with the franchise. This merchandising extended the film's presence beyond theaters and helped build long-term brand loyalty. The marketing campaign emphasized the evolution and expansion of the Underworld mythology, using phrases like "The war continues," "Bloodlines unleashed," and "The ultimate battle for survival," to intrigue audiences and hint at the epic scale of the story. These taglines captured the essence of the narrative and enticed viewers to experience the film's action and drama firsthand. In summary, the marketing and promotion of Underworld Evolution were multifaceted and well-coordinated, combining striking visual imagery, targeted media strategies, and fan engagement to maximize impact. The campaign successfully built anticipation, expanded the franchise's fanbase, and maintained the film's distinctive identity within the crowded market of supernatural action films. The film's commercial success and cultural presence owe much to this comprehensive promotional effort. Underworld Evolution, as the second installment in the Underworld franchise, invites comparison both to its predecessor and to other films within the vampire and werewolf subgenres. It also can be examined alongside works by director Len Wiseman and other films that blend gothic horror with action and mythology. This comparative analysis explores how Underworld Evolution distinguishes itself through tone, style, storytelling, and character development, as well as how it fits within the broader landscape of supernatural cinema. Compared to the original Underworld, 2003, Evolution expands the scope of the story significantly. While the first film primarily focused on the covert war between vampires and Lycans in a contemporary urban setting, Evolution delves deeper into the mythology, exploring the origins of the vampire and Lycan bloodlines and revealing ancient secrets. This broader narrative ambition gives the sequel a more epic feel, with high stakes involving lineage, prophecy, and the fate of both species. The expanded backstory enriches the franchise lore but also introduces a more complex plot that requires greater exposition. In terms of tone, Underworld Evolution retains the dark, brooding atmosphere of the original but incorporates more emotionally charged character moments. The first film leaned heavily on a noir-inspired mood, with emphasis on mystery and gothic aesthetics, while Evolution adds layers of personal drama, particularly in the relationship between Selene and Michael, and the internal struggles of characters like Markus and Amelia. This emotional depth complements the intense action scenes and elevates the stakes beyond simple physical conflict. Visually, Evolution builds on the stylistic foundation laid by the original, but with noticeable advancements. The cinematography is more ambitious, employing dynamic camera movements, creative lighting, and elaborate set pieces that create a more immersive experience. The color palette remains consistent with the franchise's signature cool blues and blacks, but the sequel integrates greater variety in environments, from ancient castles to modern labs, providing visual contrast and narrative richness. Special effects and CGI are more prominent and refined, enhancing the portrayal of the supernatural creatures and their transformations. When compared to other vampire and werewolf films of the early 2000s, Underworld Evolution distinguishes itself through its hybrid genre blend of gothic horror, action thriller, and sci-fi elements. Unlike traditional vampire movies that emphasize romance or horror, such as Interview with the Vampire or Blade, Underworld emphasizes martial combat, conspiracy, and mythology. The Lycan wolves are portrayed with a primal savagery that contrasts with the vampire's elegance, creating a clear dichotomy that echoes classic good versus evil tropes, but with modern complexity. Films like Blade 2, released around the same time, share similarities with Underworld Evolution in their stylized violence and dark tone. Both franchises feature strong lead characters skilled in combat, battling supernatural enemies in shadowy urban settings. However, Underworld's gothic sensibility and emphasis on ancient lore set it apart, creating a unique niche within the genre. Blade 2 incorporates more graphic violence and a faster pace, whereas Underworld, Evolution takes time to develop its mythology and characters. Comparing Underworld, Evolution to other vampire media highlights its focus on lineage and genetic destiny, which contrasts with the romantic or horror-driven narratives of shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or True Blood. These series often explore vampires as metaphors for human struggles with identity and morality, while Underworld centers on the tangible, physical conflicts and political intrigues between species. Its portrayal of vampires as a secretive, militarized society adds a distinct flavor of dystopian science fiction to the genre. Director Len Wiseman's style is evident across the franchise, characterized by sleek visuals, kinetic action sequences, and a cool, moody atmosphere. When compared to his later work, such as Live Free or Die Hard, Underworld, Evolution reflects his affinity for blending high-energy action with strong, focused protagonists, particularly female leads. The film's pacing and tone showcase Wiseman's skill in creating tension and spectacle simultaneously. In terms of character development, Evolution advances beyond the archetypes introduced in the first film. Selene's evolution from a stoic assassin to a more complex figure grappling with love, loyalty, and heritage adds depth to her role as a heroine. Michael's transformation into a hybrid bridges the divide between vampire and Lycan, providing a narrative mechanism to explore themes of identity and unity. This nuanced portrayal contrasts with more straightforward portrayals of supernatural beings in other franchises. When placed alongside other sequels in supernatural franchises, Underworld, Evolution stands out for its ambitious expansion of world-building and mythology. Many sequels focus mainly on increasing action or spectacle, but Evolution attempts to balance these elements with deeper narrative complexity. This approach received mixed reactions, with some praising the richer story and others finding it dense, but it ultimately contributed to the series' lasting appeal. The film also compares interestingly with other adaptations of vampire and werewolf lore. Unlike traditional Gothic tales such as Bram Stoker's Dracula or classic werewolf films like An American Werewolf in London, Underworld, Evolution reimagines these creatures within a contemporary, high-tech setting. This fusion of old myth and new technology reflects early 21st century sensibilities and cinematic trends, appealing to audiences interested in genre hybrids. Additionally, Underworld, Evolution's approach to violence and sexuality is more explicit and stylized than many earlier vampire films. The choreography of fight scenes emphasizes grace and brutality, while the film's erotic undertones, particularly in Selene's relationship with Michael, add a layer of adult intensity. This mature tone distinguishes it from teenage-oriented supernatural films that emerged later in the decade. In summary, Underworld, Evolution occupies a unique place in the vampire and werewolf film canon. It builds on the original's foundation by expanding mythology, deepening character arcs, and enhancing visual style. Its blend of gothic horror, action, and sci-fi elements sets it apart from both traditional vampire narratives and contemporary supernatural media. While comparisons to other genre films reveal shared influences and conventions, Evolution's distinct tone, narrative ambition, and aesthetic sensibility ensure it remains a defining work in early 2000s supernatural cinema and a cornerstone of the Underworld franchise.